Good morning and welcome to Travels with Monkey Boy. Today I'm taking you back to March of 1999, trip to Scotland. Good news for all of you. I have no pictures from this time period and probably going to pretty much ignore the map. So you just get stories today and for the next few days. Okay, so we begin. Okay, before I get into the details, I want it understood that Scotland was not my idea. Yeah, I've always been intrigued by Scotland, and it's always been somewhere on my to-do list, but it just wasn't a burning desire. I wanted Madagascar. I was even considering Iceland or Borneo. Hell, I had bought the Lonely Planet travel books for Madagascar and Borneo. It was then that Jilreen stepped in. After Tanzania and Nepal last year, she said, "We are going to go somewhere there is a McDonald's, someplace where things work and the roads are recognizable as things to drive on, someplace where your shopping choices go beyond food, pens, and hashish." The girl wanted civilization. She said I could choose. She said I could organize it. She said I could do anything I liked as long as it was European and organized. So slowly and surely I drew my plans. Scotland, March 26, 1999. I'm not going to comment on our flight to Scotland other than to say that it was blandly routine. It's a stretch to call it disappointing, but where's the adventure in getting on a plane at the time you're supposed to, landing when you're supposed to, and being greeted by friendly customs agents who play with your kids while you gather your documents? I'm sure in Madagascar we would have been delayed by 12 hours, had to eat eel on the plane, and been strip searched at the airport. I could have written 10 pages just on the flight to Madagascar, but Scotland, nothing. And sure, at the airport, you get in one of those cool big English cabs, but the driver was polite and spoke English and knew where he was going. He even helped us with our bags. I could tell that I was going to have to make Herculean efforts to get some pain out of this trip. Fortunately, I had planned well. We arrived by 2 p.m. to our guest house. I had decided that staying at things like Sheraton's and Hilton's was too pedestrian. Hardly an adventure waiting to happen when you stay at a five-star American-run hotel. So I did my research and found obscure bed and breakfasts and guest houses via the internet. Side note, this is more than 25 years ago, and I was already beating Airbnb at their own game. I figured this kind of approach offered us huge potential for chaos. Maybe we could be swindled by some crooked internet guy, or end up lodging in a crack house, or run into a crazed, faulty towers-esque insane innkeeper. If only. Instead, we were greeted by a smiling man, introduced to his old row house on a quiet side street not 15-minute walk from the famous Edinburgh Castle. Our room was big and clean and had comfortable beds and cartoons for the kids. Still, I was not going to let this further setback get me down. Sure, we'd been on a plane or in airports for the previous 14 hours. Sure, we'd eaten nothing but airplane food all day, but this was no time to eat or rest. This was time to begin pushing the family to test their limits. So before they had a chance to let the airline dust settle in the room, I told the troops it was time to start moving. We would see the castle for the rest of the day. As we walked to the castle, it occurred to us that we had no British pounds, and it was now 2:30 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. Fear began to grip us. No local currency for 3 days, no one to take our dollars, maybe no food or water for 3 days. And remember, 25 years ago, nobody took credit cards. Then, 25 paces in front of us was a bank, and against all my hopes and plans, it was open. I waited in line. These are called queues in English. English is a queer language where people's houses are flat, everything is bloody, and cars have bonnets. And then again, hopefully, I asked the clerk, "Do you exchange dollars for pounds?" Picture going into a neighborhood bank in Green Bay. Hell, a neighborhood bank in Chicago on a Friday afternoon and asking if they'll exchange on the spot pounds for dollars. Not only would this scoundrel do it, but he helpfully told me he would give me small bills since 50s were hard for the local retailers to cash. Then it happened. He said, He needed my passport. And I had left my passport in the hotel, and the bank would be closing before I could get it back. Aha, this was more like it. An unseen problem that now could only be solved and could not be solved and would lead to major headaches throughout the weekend. Then, no problem, sir. Do you have a picture ID? Well, I only have my Saudi driver's license and, oh, that would be perfect. And it was, and he gave us our money and we were on our way. As we wandered towards Edinburgh Castle, my mind wandered to the founders of this great city and what in the hell was the matter with them? You see, Edinburgh is not pronounced Edinburgh from the Saxon phrase meaning Ed in a mountain. It is pronounced Edinburgh, literally Ed on a donkey. Now you have a perfectly acceptable spelling, Edinburgh, or even Edinburo for the word that they're trying to say. So they could have gone that route. And there's a long-standing worldwide agreement on the pronunciation of the suffix burg, B-U-R-G-H, which they also could have used. But no, not the Scotch. They insist on naming their city one thing and pronouncing it another. I mean, Europeans contemptuously laugh at those great American cities, Cairo, Illinois, named after Cairo, Egypt. I mean, Cairo, Illinois. Versailles, Indiana, named after Versailles. But one can make a reasonable justification for the pronunciation not matching their more famous predecessors. I mean, dialects mash up words all the time. And Cairo and Versailles, Cairo and Versailles are small Midwest farm cities that are filled with a bunch of yokels. But to purposely name your son Tom and tell people that it's Dave, well, that just strikes me as goofy. The next thing that strikes you about Edinburgh is the smell. It's not a bad smell. It's not a third world smell. It's a strange smell. It's a powerful smell, but it's not an obvious smell. I sniffed for a while and tried to place it. It was kind of like the smell if you've ever been to Battle Creek, Michigan, kind of a burnt cornflake smell, though I'm sure that's not what it is. Kellogg's doesn't burn their cornflakes. It's the smell of some transformation in some grain product taking place in huge vats. We used to get that same sort of smell in Indianapolis when Eli Lilly was making a big batch of insulin. Of course, the grain transformation here was rye becoming whiskey. There's a lot of Scotch produced in Scotland, and especially in Edinburgh. You could smell it. It's pretty hard to miss the Edinburgh Castle. It's situated on a huge dormant volcano in the middle of the city. It towers above the city around it, and its imposing walls and ancient edifices, as you can see behind me, hypnotically draw the eye towards it. It's a reasonably long walk, at least the route we took, and it was a little cold, but we got to the entrance by 3. The castle stayed open until 5, so we figured we could cover every square inch of this castle in 2 hours. Boy, were we wrong. There are few attractions outside of the Disney empire that one visits and says, wow, these people know how to run an attraction. Edinburgh Castle was one of those places. They gave everyone a free headset with a CD player. As you went from site to site, there were numbers at the attraction. You type in number 35 on the CD player while at the main gate, and you get a brief historical overview of the significance of the gate to the history of the castle. And at the end, it will ask you if you want more. You could type 351 for the history of the Battle of the Gate, or 352 to hear the history of the famed gatekeeper of Edinburgh, or 353 to hear how gates work, or 354 to get an introduction to gates as art in the pre-Renaissance period. Every 5 steps, there would be another number. The kids were running around nuts trying to listen to everything. I didn't want to miss anything until I realized that I'd spent an hour and a half at the gate and decided to move along. There were some cool cannons surrounding the walls. There was a modern, not quite so interesting, 1 o'clock castle howitzer. It was called the 1 o'clock because the big gun they fired every day at 1 p.m. so people could set their watches. This was before the internet. There was a marvelous multimedia tour of the Scottish crown jewels, which were stolen by the English and then returned 500 years later with mysteriously quartz-like looking diamonds. And there was a huge cannon that was the biggest cannon ever used by the Scots. Doreen and the kids went to see the place where Mary Queen of Scots gave birth to James VI, future king of all England. They also saw the war monument and the dance hall and the bedchambers and had an ice cream while I was at the gate listening to the types of wood used to make the best gate. Frankly, we could have stayed at the castle a couple hours longer, but they kicked us out. That and we were cold and hungry and tired. By this time, we had been walking for nearly 4 hours, and that's about the point where the kids begin to feel the pain. But I promised them that we would go to the Hard Rock Cafe for dinner and ice cream. I had the street name and a vague idea of where this place was and a pitiful map to guide us. Remember, this is before Google Maps where your phone's just told you every turn. According to my orienteering skills, the Hard Rock Cafe was a little bit north and a little bit west of where we stood. Did I mention how twisty the roads were? I took one look at the map and started us on the road east. We walked for about 6 blocks when I realized this road wasn't exactly right. We couldn't find any of the street names on the map, and, well, I'd be damned if I was going to ask for directions. Our meandering road eventually brought us in front of the English History Museum. I knew that had to be on the map, and indeed it was, but curiously, much further from Hard Rock Cafe than when we'd started. We found a street that looked promising, at least on the map, which unfortunately was not three-dimensional. This road took us south and up a huge hill, where we could see now that the old city was below us, this being like an old city Hard Rock Cafe bypass. As in most bypasses, it was a long way uphill. Before we found a side street that took us back down to the old city where we wanted to be. Finally, we found a side alley and descended a few hundred steps, walked up another hill, and voila, we were back within 100 yards of where we'd started. I then took us on the south side of the castle, heading west. At this point, the kids were dying and begging for a cafe when I discovered, using the map, that we were only a few blocks away from the right street. As we trudged along with the kids cursing my name, I came to the harsh but silent realization that while indeed I had found the right street, I found the wrong end of it. The Hard Rock Cafe was about 3 miles up the street. At last, an hour and a half after we'd started, we reached our goal. Of course, we nearly had a mutiny when the kids realized that Hard Rock Cafe was in reality a brisk 10-minute walk from the castle, but as always, fatty food and ice cream won the day. Dinner was a feast, Hard Rock Cafe having a great kids meal that featured a cheeseburger as big as Alex's head and a free dessert after the meal. With all the walking, we were famished, and Alex destroyed his dinner. But after the gorging was so full, he laid his head on the table. Just at that moment, the waiter came up to the table. Alex said, "I'm so stuffed." The waiter said, "For dessert, we have chocolate or vanilla ice cream." And with barely a breath before his last sentence, Alex said, "Scoop of each, please." An absolutely homage to gluttony. I was so proud. After dinner, the kids were so sleepy they could barely stand, and it was freezing outside. So I told them that we could take a cab. Well, we couldn't find a cab. But geez, it was only 10 minutes back to the castle, and I sure knew how to get to the hotel from there. And indeed, I had us going in the right direction until suddenly we found ourselves walking in a strange and completely unfamiliar area. The kids sensed fear, and Alex, almost to the point of collapsing, wanted me to carry him. Okay, Alex is a third grader now. He weighs in excess of 60 pounds, but I knew this was my screw up, and I knew we couldn't be more than 5 minutes from the hotel, so I carried him. After about 5 minutes of my weaving and my knees buckling, he told me, "Dad, it's okay. I'll walk from here." And within half an hour, we found the right path and were soon back to the hotel. Okay, that's the end of the tale for today. Hope you tune again tomorrow for day 2 of the trip.